Welcome to the Fellowship Podcast, a place where we have gospel conversations about loving God and transforming lives by following Jesus through life-on-life relationships. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Fellowship Podcast. I'm excited to be here today with Kyle and Shelby Randel. Did I do good saying that one?
That's right.
Not Shelby Smith, Shelby Randel. But two missionaries that are back home from Thailand, and we're excited to have them here. We've been a part of their life for a while as Fellowship Church, supporting them on mission. Shelby, my daughter, Shelby, who we sent off on missions and then came home with a tall, handsome boy. So quite the adventure. But to start with, let's talk a little bit about y'all's faith journey and how you came to know the Lord and how God just really saved your soul. So Kyle, tell us a little bit about your walk and your journey with Christ.
Okay. So I grew up in a Christian family in California. And so I grew up going to church and Christian school. And so, I was really, really blessed to hear the gospel from a young age. And so, I think I prayed the prayer to receive Christ when I was like 4 years old. But there's definitely a lot more steps on my journey of faith. I think God did a lot of work in my heart as I went to youth group in middle school and high school. Kind of another big moment in my faith journey was actually when I went on my first mission trip with my church. Yeah. In high school, I went to Uganda with my church. And that was the start of that whole journey of being interested in missions. So God has done a lot of kind of work in my life over those years of.
Yeah, and right now you're in seminary. What do you study in seminary?
Yeah, so my program's called Christian Ministry and Leadership. So I'm learning all sorts of different cool stuff from theology to apologetics to all sorts of ministry classes. It's been a really, really cool.
Do you get college credit for spending years on the mission field?
No.
Okay, just thought I'd ask.
But I did get to continue doing my degree online in Thailand, which was so cool that I was on the other side of the world and continued to get to do my education from my school in California. So
and part of your gifting from the Lord when as your life has grown is evangelism, right? And so that's something I'm excited for us to talk about and see how God used that gift on the mission field as well. So Shelby, tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a Christian.
I'm the same as Kyle. Grew up in a Christian home, obviously. But I think there's kind of three phases, I feel like, of my walk with the Lord. I think I was really young. You probably know more, like when I actually said the prayer. I don't know.
Like 6.
Yeah, I was like really small. I don't even really remember it. But just always grew up like doing the Christian stuff. But then it wasn't until I went to cosmetology school where I actually was like, okay, I got to live this as like my own faith. Because it's really easy whenever you just like grow up in that environment, just to kind of like learn the things. And it is in your heart, but it just isn't the same if you're not getting any pushback. Since I went off into like the world and had to like be the only Christian there, I was like, whoa, I really, really got to like push to learn. And so that was one big moment for me with the Lord. And then I feel like my third one was probably whenever I was in Thailand and I was getting discipled by our friend Monica. And I just feel like all of a sudden there was that like just devouring hunger for the word and like really wanting to know like the niche little things about our faith, like all the different questions that I always heard growing up. I used to not really care. I was like, who cares whenever the Lord comes in the end, like pre-trib, post-trib, who really cares? But now I'm like, ooh, which one is it? Like, let's study it. So that's been a really cool like step in my journey, kind of like growing up and really learning the basics and loving it and then like having to stand for it. And then actually like diving in really deep. So that's kind of my journey.
Yeah, as a dad, it's one of the things I've loved coming home and seeing you guys sitting at the table, reading through Acts and discussing the Bible and talking about, what it means and what it looks like. And so just, I think, great example of marriage and what it's supposed to be, where there's not just a physical component, emotional component, but there's a spiritual component as well. And so, but both of y'all met on the mission field. And so tell us a little bit about how you guys met on the mission field. What is the story of Kyle and Shelby?
Okay, so it started way before Kyle even knew I existed. We had some really close friends, and they were hyping him up. So Kyle came as like an intern with our church in Thailand. And so they're like showing me his Instagram. They're like, oh, like this is what he said in his interview. Like this is his personality. And I was like, oh, whatever. Like playing it cool, Played it cool around our friends. He didn't want them to know. But then he finally came and, I was up in our sound booth at church doing the slide, just, being all like really, really cool and stuff. And then went and talked to him. And he was just the funnest to talk to. So chill, so easy. Literally his first day, it was his second day ever in Thailand, his first day at church. And I go up and talk to him, like, do you want to sit by me? And he's like, yeah, can we save a seat for my friend? And I was like, how does he already have a friend? Like, he literally got here yesterday. But yeah, his friend came and like sat with us and stuff. And then I ended up going to kids ministry, but yeah. And then it just kind of started from there. We started hanging out. So for me, like whenever I was in Thailand the first time as an intern, I just remember there being this hard, distinctive line between like the staff and the interns. And there was like a kind of a divide. So whenever I came again as like a staff, I was like, okay, I don't want that to be there. I want there to be like a bringing in of the interns and it being like a fun thing. And he was an intern. So it was a perfect excuse to be like, oh, I'm including all the interns. You want to come over for dinner? So yeah, we just started hanging out kind of in a little group. All right, you pick up.
Yeah, so like Shelby said, she knew me before I knew her. And so, yeah, so that was pretty interesting hearing about all of that later. But yeah, basically, so I was there in Thailand the first time just for a few months doing an internship with the church. And yeah, I think like as I was getting to know Shelby, I was like, man, this girl's so awesome. And I had this like internal struggle in my mind of like, man, I'm only going to be here for a little bit, but like Shelby's so awesome. What do I do? And to make matters even more complicated, part of my agreement for my internship that I signed was that I couldn't start a new relationship while I was there in Thailand. And so there were definitely some hurdles, but yeah, basically I talked with my pastor there and he gave me the green light and I thought, man, I gotta at least shoot my shot here and see how things go with Shelby. And yeah, I'm so glad that we did. So.
And y'all dated for quite a while, long distance, right? Because you were only there a few months, and really y'all's relationship blossomed at the end of that time. And so, what was it like dating long distance? Like, yeah, I remember y'all had phone dates.
It was,
yeah,
but it was. Yeah, we would do like FaceTime dates, but with the time difference, he was in California. So sometimes it was like 14 hours and sometimes it was 15-hour time difference. So I would stay up and our date would start at like 11 and you would start at like...
I think we would start at 7 a.m. my time and 10 p.m. your time.
Yeah, something like that. So we started our like 3-4 hour date at like 10 p.m. after I'd worked all day. But yeah, so we really tried to like have long dates and just talk, and we played little games online together. But yeah, it was pretty challenging too because I was in a spot where I was like kind of working and like there wasn't a translator for me. So I had no one to really talk to. And then while I was at work, it's like he was asleep. So I would just feel really like, had a really hard time feeling kind of like alone. But I do think it was like really a huge blessing that I did have him during that time too, because I had someone to talk about my day with and just sharing all the struggles and stuff. So I was really thankful for him. And yeah, I got to visit him. So he visited me once and then I visited you twice.
Yeah.
So it was really cool because like we were long distance for a long time, literally opposite side of the world. But then we got to visit each other like 3 times. Like that's kind of crazy. Yeah. So that was really helpful too, just to spend some time in person together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite dates we would have is when we would order food for each other. So Shelby would order something on DoorDash for me and deliver it to my house. And then I would order something on Food Panda, which is Thailand's DoorDash, and I would deliver it to Shelby's house. So
it'd be like
really
quadruple as expensive to get him a meal. And then it'd be like $2 for my meal and like 20 for his.
Yeah.
Kind of rough deal for me, but worth it.
That's fun. But you guys got married on May 4th and you're, not quite a year in, right?
Not quite.
9 months?
Yeah.
9 months, right? And so that's pretty exciting. So Shelby, tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Thailand, because you went to Thailand for a year and then you came home COVID time and, had a little Anki problem and then went back for a while. tell us what was your call to missions like, and how did that all work out?
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like when I was young, I always was interested in like the world and the foreign missions scape. I started going on mission trips really young. I think our family went on one
Yep.
like when I was like 13 or something.
Honduras, yeah.
Yeah, so that was my first kind of intro into missions, and I really loved it. So then I was able to go with some of our friends to Romania and start like their ministry was starting, and I came and like helped watch the kids. And it was rough, and I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm just a short-term missions trip person. I am not a long-term person, and I'm just going to be okay with that. So then I kind of was like, yeah, it was just really challenging, and I was like, okay, I don't want to deal with it. But then it was my last year of high school, so then that was kind of what I was like wanting to do. So then I was like, oh, okay, like now what type of thing? And I remember we went to our last, my last, what is it called? Youth camp of my high school career.
Yeah.
And I'd been 4 years, and every time they had a missions focus, and every time that was Africa. And I remember thinking, like, that's cool. Like, lots of missions in Africa. Awesome. But then this year, of course, as God does, it was Asia. And I was like, whoa. And I just remember in worship, God was like, you're going to go. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to go. So then I, started working up all these ideas in my head. Like, I love kids. I'll start an orphanage. I'll work at a baby's home. I had all these aspiring plans. And so I was like talking with the Lord, and he's like, I want you to go learn how to cut hair. And I was like, but Lord, if you want me to do missions and cut hair, that doesn't even fit together. I don't know of any way you could do both of those things at one time. But I wanted to obey, so I ended up going to cosmetology school. And yeah, that was the time I really learned how I had to like stand up for my faith, my own, and realizing like, wow, America has its own mission field. I don't have to just like wait to go on a mission field. Like I could just totally be like a missionary in my own country.
Yeah.
So that was really cool, and that really like softened my heart. And then the day came where a missionary came to the church I was going to. That was from Asia, and I was like, oh, it's my time. So I ran over there, and I was like, I'm Shelby. Here's what I want to do in Asia. And I was telling them all my plans. I want to do this and this. And they were very nice and very sweet to me. And we're like, actually, we don't really, that's not really a need in Asia. I'm like,
orphanages, right?
yeah, they're like, we don't really need orphanages. The culture is very like taking care of the youngers. So there isn't a lot of need for that. And I was like, oh, this is so sad. My heart was like, no. And they were so sweet. They're like, well, what are you doing? And I was like, just learning how to cut hair, And they were like, really? I know of this ministry where literally they teach women who have been exploited and trafficked, they bring them out of it and they teach them how to do hair and send them off with a new career path. And I was like, oh, just like, whoa. So that was my first kind of like intro into my field being a mission, So then I sought out just how to help in that area. There's a lot of different schools around Southeast Asia. And there was one in Phuket that needed help. It was their first year, and they needed a little intern to come and just help the teacher because she had just had a baby. So I went, and that was my first kind of intro into the...
With For Freedom International, right?
Yeah. So that was the organization For Freedom International, what I worked with. And yeah, so I was there for a year and then came back, and I thought I was going to go to a different country. But the Lord brought me back to Phuket, which I'm really thankful He did. And yeah, so then I worked there as the head instructor at For Freedom International. We had a salon called Grace Salon, and we would help girls. We ended up focusing in on like girls who were really young. So there's a lot of like 13 to 17-year-old girls who had been really exploited and yeah, just really sad stories. And so they'd come to us and we'd house them, teach them about the Lord, teach them English, teach them life skills, and then teach them a vocation. And so yeah, I had a couple girls graduate from there. Yeah, it was really, really fun. And I didn't have a translator for some of it, so I got to learn a lot of the Thai language, which was really challenging, but also really fun to be able to speak to them and have inside jokes in another language. Yeah, lots of mistakes, though.
Well, because Thailand is a tonal language, right? And
yeah.
The way you say things, the way you slide. Can you say something in Thai?
Yeah. สวัสดีค่ะฉันชื่อ Shelby ค่ะ I said, hi, my name is Shelby.
Yeah. And so it has a lot of like tonation changes, like sliding ups and sliding downs, and those mean different things, as you learned when you were there, trying to be you're very excited and expressionable. You are a Smith in that way, right? And in that way, but that wasn't always good, right?
No.
In fact, do you want to tell the story?
Okay, I'll tell the story. So my first year there, I'm really excited. So I was telling them, I want to tell them good job. Like they cut a straight line. How do I say good job? And they're like, oh, say D. And I was like, oh, D, D, and they're like, the students are kind of looking at me like, and I was like, guys, what am I doing wrong? And they're like, oh, you're saying D instead of D. I was like,
That
I'm
sounds the
saying
same.
what? And they're like, you're saying D instead of D. And I was like, okay. And they're like, instead of saying good, you're calling them lesbians. And you're just saying, you're lesbian the whole time. And I was like, oh no. I was just feeling on my mission field. And I'm like, So then they told me, if you really want to be excited, say mak, which means a lot. So the girls never did good. They always did really good.
Mock,
Yeah,
right?
because I could say D, mak.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did a lot of those kind of oopsies. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
5 tones, and you can either do short or long vowels. So technically there's 10 tones. Could I do them? Okay. My. That was 5 different tones.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's really
And
good.
one word can mean 5 different things, or maybe if you do them in long, even more
Yeah.
different things. And then there's like feminine and masculine. Like we wouldn't say swati ka, we'd say swati kop, right? And
Yeah.
so they just, I mean, it's just so much to learn another language. And Kyle, how'd you do it learning Thai?
You did good.
I would defer to Shelby. Yeah, pretty much everything.
Learn
So-
the basics.
Kyle, whenever he lived there, they couldn't really say his name because Thai people can't say like the L. So they call him Kyle. Kyle. And you're like, okay. So then they started calling him Kai, which means egg. And then they wanted to be polite, so they say Pikai, which means Mr. Egg. So he'd walk in the salon, they'd be like, Mr. Egg, what's up?
Pikai.
So yeah, he became Mr. Egg, and he could always say hello. He could always say, how are you? You could order food, of
He
course.
could order sourdough sandwiches from Fold. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think he did pretty good, yeah?
So, Shelby, what was it like going into the red light district? Because one of the questions I got the most whenever we send our beautiful young daughter to Thailand, right? I think you were young then, the first time you went, 2019. So you're like 19 or 20, I think, when you went. And they're like, you're going to let her go in the red light district? And I was like, yes, I have a very good set of skills. Not as like, no, like I trust the Lord wherever she's at and around the world. Like, first of all, have you seen Shelby drive? I have to trust the Lord every time she gets in the car driving. But we're 3 feet from death every time we pass somebody on a road. So you got to trust the Lord, whether she's in downtown Kyle or whether she's in San Antonio or whether she's in Thailand. You have to trust the Lord. But what was it like your first experience going to the red light district where many of these girls are being sexually exploited? And that's the reality.
Yeah, really heartbreaking. I think like the first time I went in there, I went with a group of people, so you don't feel as like scared. And I just remember feeling really angry because I was seeing all these men go up to the bars and the girls having to be like, and I just was like, why are you here? Like, if you weren't here, they wouldn't have to do this, just feeling really like that anger well up in me. But then we went and sat down and actually talked to the girls, and that's kind of where like the sadness hit of just like there'd be a little kid running around in there because they got pregnant and then they still had to go to work. The pimp wouldn't let them not go, and so the kid's just like in the bar, and that just is really sad to see. But I think as my language started to improve, like it was so much better because I could actually chat with them and like get to know them as people and not just see the situation and how sad that is. So yeah, it was pretty sad. And a lot of our girls that we had in our program were online being exploited. So that was a whole nother piece too. It's like when you see it in person, and then but then when you see really young girls who like online from these creeps, and then they still want to be online and do these things, and you're like, in the red light district, you can escape it. You can walk away and not be around it, but like they couldn't escape like their phones and stuff. So it's just, I felt like that whole situation was just really sad. But yeah, I feel like we would have like events and stuff, and we'd invite the girls from the bars to come to, like, we had a Valentine's Day event. So like, oh, come and hear about our program and stuff. And we'd have to like pay the bars a fee to let them not work that night and stuff. And that just like reality of them being so like in bondage was really hard. And then also the girls, we'd try to say, okay, now come out. And they're like, we don't want to. We like it here. But then like looking in their eyes and like you could just tell that they had convinced themselves that like, no, we like it, it's our choice. And I'm like, is it though? Like the way that you're acting and talking, so that was really hard too. Just these false realities they built up to try to like cope with this really tough situation. So yeah, lots of sadness in that
Yeah, it had to
spot.
be very satisfying though when you saw them get through the program and now have a new way to earn income for many of them, for their families and for others, that didn't involve selling themselves into these things. And so, did you have any particular students that were like a special blessing to you through the program?
I had a couple students at the end that were really fun to be around. But I think the one who really impacted me a lot was when I was an intern. There's one girl, her name was Bowie, and she knew the most English. And at that time, I was like an intern, so I barely knew how to say anything. And so me and her would chat a lot. And yeah, just her joy was crazy to experience. She just like was so joyful in the salon. And even when she was having a really hard time and like, getting a little frustrated, like, my haircut just isn't straight, like, she just would never really like freak out. She'd just be like, take a sec and then jump right back into it. She's like so hardworking. And she one time invited me over and we cooked an omelet. So it's called a kai diao. And so we always joked around because I would eat one like every morning. And she's like, I need to help you save money. You need to come and I'll teach you how to make a Thai like omelet. So just like, yeah, she was just very, very thoughtful and sweet. And yeah, she came to the Lord, which is super amazing. Yeah. So that was really cool too. Once she came to the Lord, she really like was thinking about it and like really like trying to understand like faith and what that meant and like the depths of Christianity and stuff. So that was really cool because some of the girls in the program, they'll kind of like accept the Lord, because everyone is, and all the people that are so
Expectation.
nice, they'll just be like, okay, yeah, I'll live as a Christian, but then like not really, you know what I mean? Yeah, in Thai culture is very shame and honor based, so they didn't want to like get the shame of reject, so it's just a very
Right.
hard balance of stuff. But yeah, so she like really wanted to know the Lord, and yeah, it's just really cool to like be a part of her life.
Yeah. What was and Kyle, you can jump in this too. What was the spiritual climate like in Thailand? Because I think sometimes for people who haven't got out of the, Texas bubble, right? They might think, well, everywhere's like Texas. They'll let you pray, let you do whatever. What's it like, the spiritual culture in Phuket or Thailand?
Yeah, I think like a really interesting image of the kind of spiritual plane in Thailand is this one picture that I took on top of a mountain. So we went on top of this mountain and I took a photo that kind of overlooks the island, and you see the ocean and maybe even some islands off in the distance, and it's just this amazing display of God's creation. Just such a beautiful view. And then on this mountain, you're looking at this view over the ocean, but then you turn around and you see this gigantic 150-foot tall Buddha idol. And people go there and perform all kinds of Buddhist rituals. And it's just this really interesting contrast where you see this place that has this incredible natural beauty, but so few people know the Lord, and you have this intense spiritual darkness that kind of comes along with Buddhism. One I think like really clear sign of that is a lot of Thai Buddhists will set up these structures in front of their house. They call them spirit houses. So they put up these, they kind of look like altars, and they put these in front of their house, thinking that they're inviting spirits to come and protect their home. But really what they're doing without realizing it is they're inviting demons to come and live on their property. And that causes all sorts of problems, of course. And so, so when you have kind of the Buddhism and all of just the demonic rituals that kind of come along with that, as well as, just the sin that we see like in the red light district and all around the island. It is the spiritual plane there is really, really dark.
Yeah, when you have Christian eyes to see, like even going up to see Big Buddha, snake imagery and the sacrifice kind of mentality that's there. Just kind of when you have eyes to see, it's like the demonic nature of those things is so evident. But so many people just don't have eyes to see, right? And if I'm remembering correct, a lot of Buddhism is inner self, right? It's a lot of inner enlightenment and being the best version of you, and then also karma, right? Karma is a major component of that, which has its benefits because sometimes people can be very nice because of karma. How did you see that play out in y'all's time there in Phuket?
Yeah, I mean, one example that really sticks out to me is one time I was driving on my motorbike and then I ran out of gas, which is like really unfortunate. And so I'm just kind of stranded on the side of the road and I'm like, well, now what do I do? And this Thai guy on his motorbike pulls over and, he asked me like, what's up? And I was like, I ran out of gas, feeling like, well, that was unfortunate. And he's like, all right, wait here, which I'm like, okay.
I can't go anywhere, right?
He's like, I'll be back in 10 minutes. And I was like, okay. And he comes back 10 minutes later with a bottle of gas and he fills up my gas tank for me. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like that was so kind. And I like reach into my wallet to like pay him for it. And he's already on his motorbike and he's already gone. And I was like, wow, that was so kind. Like, yeah, I mean, that's just one example. I mean, Thai people are just so kind, in general. And yeah, and that was something really interesting to reflect on because, yeah, when I was thinking about like, okay, what motivated that guy to do that? Yeah, I mean, one possible answer is that, yeah, it was karma that was motivating him. Like for lots of Buddhists, they feel like, okay, if I do good, I'll get good. And if I do bad, I'll get bad. And so, like you said, there are definitely benefits. Like we didn't have to worry about like, are things getting stolen? Because, Buddhist people often just don't do that. But then it's like, oh, what's the heart behind that? It's definitely not Jesus. And so like, yeah, thinking about those sorts of things were really, really
Because it
interesting.
can be a little confusing. Well, scripturally, it's like, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. And when he goes off, it's like, it could seem like, oh, he's just doing that of his heart. But when you look into karma, it's like, I'm doing good to you so that someone else will do good to me, right? There is still this eye for an eye scoreboard kind of mentality that creeps in, which makes him a very nice culture
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. But it still is about self and it still is about works, right? Which is what I'm sure makes it hard to share about the love of Christ when there is this way I don't have to do anything. Like, isn't there, it's like Jesus plus karma. Like, can't I do those things together? And I think a lot of the world tries to do that where they take Jesus and they kind of add him into their worldview. And that's not how Christ wants to be him alone. So
Definitely. Yeah, and I mean, what you just described, I think is what a lot of Thai people struggle with when they hear the gospel. Like if you tell them that like there's one God and that's the God who we as Christians worship, like that might not even register. Like, what do you mean one God? Like,
Right.
like, some people will say like, oh, Jesus, he sounds cool. Like, I'll worship him too. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like like talking about like the true God and the true gospel. Yeah,
He come to the spirit house and whatever, right? And it's like, no, it's not how it works, right? In fact, sometimes they'll put, I think, food in the spirit houses and things like that. And that's very common around the world to have this sort of spirit house that they'll have, quote unquote. We would call them sacrifices or offerings to the spirit that is there. We know that that's demonic. Well, again, when you have Christian eyes to see, but I don't think they do. I think they just want to appease whatever is the feeling that they have, and they're willing to do almost anything to try to be good and to get that.
And what I think is really interesting is because, like, my students, they'd be scared to go to the bathroom. And I'd be like, okay, just go to the bathroom. And they'd be like, no, there's, like, bad stuff in there. There's ghosts and stuff. And then so it's almost like they recognized a bad and a good spiritual realm. But it's like the good is still disguised as good, and it's really still just as evil. But it was really interesting to like observe how they'd be like, oh, that's a bad one. Oh, but that's a good one. And but it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? You know, like how do you see the good and bad, but don't actually see the good and the bad? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think the Bible says eternity is written on the hearts of men, and that you look at some of, so we're talking missions, right? You look at some of these really remote villages, and you read stories about Papua New Guinea or even the Aka Indians, and Nate Saint and Elizabeth Saint, and those incredible stories of these incredible missionaries, right? Which we read a ton to you as a child. I'm sure had an influence on you over those years, but they have a moral code that's very similar to the 10 Commandments. Like when you look at those cultures, it's like we shouldn't murder someone, and if I say I'm going to give you 2 goats, I should give you 2 goats. Like I shouldn't lie or give false witness, and they have a lot of that morality. I think that just naturally comes out in those situations, and I think similarly, good spirits, bad spirits. I think those things come out, and you've had some experience with that over the years of seeing things in the spiritual realm that have been fascinating and crazy. Did you feel like a darkness when you're in Thailand? Like, could you just feel it? What is it when we say I could just feel the darkness? What does that mean? Could you put it into words? I don't know if you can, but
I would say it's like heavy. Like when you're just there, you feel like it feels like a heaviness, I guess.
like what?
And yeah, I think that we've talked about this before. Like when we got married, we moved back to Thailand. And when you're first married, there's a couple like maybe hardships of just learning how to be married. But then when we moved back to America, it was like instantly gone. Like we were like, wow, this is like the easiest thing ever. And I think that some of it's just learning how to like be married, but I also think some of it was the spiritual realm, like just the tension. There would be these times where it's like you just feel this like, and you like don't know how to what to do with it. And we could actually see Big Buddha, that huge idol Kyle was talking about, from our window. And I remember looking at that and like say, oh Lord, knock that guy off this mountain, just like is so angry, and like a good righteous
and God
anger.
kind of answered that.
Low key. Yeah, there was a landslide off the side of the mountain and they're talking about tearing it down. Hope they do.
Lord Jesus, that's our prayer.
Yeah.
What about you, Kyle? How would you describe like a spiritual weight or what you felt in Thailand?
Yeah. I mean, I think what Shelby said, I definitely agree. I think one example was, so there's an annual festival in Phuket. They call it the Vegetarian Festival. So it's kind of a harvest festival, but then there's also unfortunately kind of a demonic spiritual component to it as well. So they'll have parades through the street kind of celebrating this festival. But unfortunately, something that happens in these parades is they'll have people who are kind of designated as spirit mediums, and those people will get themselves possessed with demons and then kind of be parading through the streets, just out in the open, like possessed by demons. And yeah, I remember, one time we were kind of like walking around and the parade came right by us. And I remember before we even saw it, I remember feeling really weird. And then like when we got up to the parade, we like see what's happening and it's like, oh my goodness, like I feel like I could feel the spiritual presence before we even saw
Like
it.
it's like your mind kind of feels crazy, but nothing's happening. Like you feel like your mind is going everywhere and you don't really know what's going on. You feel confused, like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like Shelby said, like, yeah, there's like a darkness and a heaviness. I mean, like looking around, there's so many people suffering, like people in the red light district or like the Burmese refugees who are there escaping the civil war in their home country. Like there's so much suffering there. And yeah, and I think like, yeah, I think like the demons will come and try and just make even more havoc in a place that already has so much suffering. And and like Shelby said, like just coming home, like it felt so different. Of course there is spiritual warfare here, like that's for sure, but it's yeah, it's definitely different. And yeah, we could feel that pretty much immediately when we got home.
Instantly I feel like we got here and it was like, like, it just felt like so different. Yeah.
Here's one of the things I think that we don't realize when we send missionaries on the mission field. We recognize this a little bit when the Georges and Ebels went to Romania. Is just there's a spiritual darkness that happens when you're on mission for God, that if you don't have that support and those people in your life that can speak into you, that man, that darkness can overwhelm you and it can really discourage you from fulfilling the mission God's put on your heart to go and to share the gospel, to help girls escape the sex trade and have a new life, or to help people experience the gospel. And Kyle, when you went, your job was primarily evangelism, right? Tell us a little bit about what God called you to do when you went to Phuket.
Yeah. So I was kind of wearing a lot of different hats in Phuket. So I was doing evangelism, and then Shelby and I were both on staff with our church. And then, I had the blessing to be able to disciple a few of the guys, some of the younger believers in our church. And so that was such a blessing. But the whole journey of me coming out to Thailand was, there were so many steps in that journey. Like I mentioned earlier, my first mission trip I ever went on was when I was in high school. I went to Uganda. I think that's when God kind of put the mission field on my radar. And then, when I was in college, I read a book by John Piper. It was called Don't Waste Your Life. And that book made a profound impact on me. And the thing that stuck out to me most was when it was towards the end of the book, John Piper was talking about this thing that I had never heard of. It was called the 1040 window. And I thought, okay, like, what is this thing? And basically, as he was describing it, it's the region of the world that's between 10 and 40 degrees latitude. So that kind of includes Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. Basically, it's that kind of strip of the world in that region. And what John Piper shared is that in that kind of region of the world, there are literally hundreds of millions of people who have never had a meaningful encounter with the name Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that just blew my mind when I heard about that. I thought pretty much everyone in the world had at least heard about Jesus, had heard a Christmas song or had heard something. But I realized that there were hundreds of millions of people who'd never heard like a full explanation of the gospel, and that shocked me. It blew my mind, and it kind of made me think, like, man, like I need to do something about this. Mm-hmm. And then things started getting kind of weird. So weird in a good way. So I read about this thing called the 1040 window. And then I go and tell my dad about it. I was like, Dad, this is crazy. This thing, it's called the 1040 window. and so we were chatting about that. And then, and then kind of during our conversation, we kind of started talking about his work and what he was up to. And he's a finance guy. And so he was talking about the tax returns that he had to do for his clients, which is Form 1040. And I was like, that's kind of funny. 1040, didn't think much of it. But then a couple days later, I'm on Amazon ordering some stuff for my upcoming semester, and I had to get ready for cold season coming up. So I was buying myself a bunch of tissues, and and as I'm ordering this giant pack of tissues on Amazon, I realized, wait a second, there are 1,040 tissues in this thing. Like, okay, that's kind of weird to see that number come up again. Like, not a number I normally see, but oh well. But then a couple days later, I was at a casino with my sister, and we were on a family trip in the Czech Republic. And so we were at this casino. We had a pretty successful evening, And
Don't mean to brag, but
yeah, just a little flex. But I wanted to, count up how much we had at the end of the evening. And I kid you not, I counted, and in my hand, the currency, there's the crown. In my hand, I counted 1,040 crowns. And I was like, no way. Like, it wasn't just some normal number like 5, it was 1040. And it's like, okay, that's so weird. But then to cap it all off, a couple days after that, I'm sitting at dinner with my family and I'm telling them about my upcoming semester at school. And I was really excited. I was like, guys, it'll be awesome. I don't have any early morning classes this semester. In fact, my earliest class doesn't start until
10:40.
10:40. And I was like, no way.
That's awesome.
And so I couldn't help but just notice that this really unusual number was popping up all over the place in my life. And I couldn't help but notice this. And I didn't make any crazy life-changing decisions, at least not immediately. But I kind of kept this on my radar. This whole idea of the 1040 window kind of kept it on my radar throughout college. And so that was my freshman year of college that I learned about that.
By the way, did you make $1,040 on Wheel of Fortune? No. That would have been funny.
That would have been great.
Yeah, little known fact, Kyle was on Wheel of Fortune on college week. And so
Wheel of
you
Fortune.
can go Google that sometime and try to find Kyle Randel on Wheel of Fortune. But anyway, I just thought it'd be fun. That would be cool. 1040.
That would have been really crazy. But,
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, Wheel of Fortune, that was fun. So my senior year of college, I still had the 1040 window just kind of on my radar. And I was talking with my pastor and telling him, like, hey, after I graduate, like, I kind of want to do this gap year and do some mission work before I consider starting seminary. And I kind of asked him, like, do you have any advice for me, what I can do? And he goes, well, what do you think about Thailand? And, and so I kind of pull up the map in my mind. I'm like, yeah, that's in the 1040 window. And basically, like, he knew the pastor of our church out there. And so he connected me with him, and I ended up doing an internship with the pastor of this church that Shelby was attending. And so that's how we met. And I ended up kind of falling in love with this church and with Thailand and with Shelby. And and so
a 1040 window.
the 1040 window. So yeah, that's kind of how that journey happened for me.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. And God's really gifted you in evangelism. I know when we had a chance to go visit, we went to the mall, sitting down, visiting with people in the mall to try to share Christ with them. What was that like, sharing the gospel with people in Thailand? Were you nervous about that? Was it a challenge? What was that like?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I've done it so many times now that I've, like, gone up and shared the gospel with someone. But I think, like, the nervousness, like, I don't know, it never really goes away. Maybe sometimes it does, or maybe for some people it does. But yeah, I think, like, going up to a random stranger at the mall and saying, like, hey, you want to chat? Like, it's scary. Like, even after doing it so many times. But man, it was such a cool adventure. And being in Phuket, which is such an international hub, like, I got the chance to talk with people from so many different countries, of so many different backgrounds. And so you never really know what you're going to walk into. Like, even after doing it so many times, it's like, okay, like, starting fresh with a new person from who knows where, speaking who knows what language, like, it's always an adventure. And so, it was really, really fun.
What was your greatest, like, blessing with someone, like someone you discipled? I mean, did you see him grow in the Lord there in Thailand, and that maybe it was the hardest one to leave and you guys just came back home?
Man.
And it doesn't have to be just one. It doesn't have to be favorites.
Yeah.
But, somebody that you felt like, man, the Lord really brought me to this person, and I got to disciple them, and it was such a blessing.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say the guy who would stand out to me, who was really hard to leave, was our friend Peter. Um, so basically, yeah, Peter was a guy from a different province in Thailand, but he came to Phuket when he was starting college. And so he was already a Christian when he came to Phuket, which is pretty rare for there to be a Thai Christian. Like there aren't many of them. And so he comes to Phuket and he's looking for a church community to get plugged into. And so we met on the same campus as a Thai church. And so he shows up on Sunday morning thinking he's coming to the Thai service. And then all of a sudden there's a bunch of foreigners there. And he's like, wait, what's going on here? And, someone explained to him, like, oh, this is the foreigner service. Like the Thai service meets in the afternoon. And he was like, oh, okay. And he ended up sticking around and he ended up staying with us in the English speaking service, which was so cool to have like a local Thai Christian as a part of our kind of foreign Christian community. And yeah, so this guy had a really big heart for evangelism as well. And I ended up hearing one time at church that he was doing this ministry on TikTok, which I didn't know that was possible. But yeah, basically, he was kind of making these posts on TikTok where he would sing songs, and then people started doing song requests, and some people were requesting that he sing worship songs on TikTok, and so he started doing that. And then what started happening is there were some Thai Muslims who were commenting on his posts and saying like Jesus isn't God, and like kind of debating with him in the chat. And he's like, well, I can't just leave these comments here on my TikTok page. Like I need to respond to these. And so he ends up kind of having these kind of debates in the chat. And then the Thai Muslims end up wanting to have their imam, kind of their local religious leader, do a live debate on TikTok with our friend Peter, who's this college student.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he's only like 22 years old, but he accepts and he does this live debate with a Muslim leader on TikTok, and he ends up silencing him. It was like, it's absolutely amazing. Like, yeah, I mean, just the courage that he had to do this debate in front of so many people. And then to actually like, yeah, really, really put a good presentation of the gospel forward. It's just absolutely amazing. And so I met with him and I just asked him, I was like, dude, is there any way I can help? Like, I would love to be a part of this, even if I'm just in the background. Like, I would love to be here supporting this amazing ministry. I mean, there were multiple people who were coming to Christ from his TikTok ministry, which was so cool. And I just asked him, like, is there any way that I can support you? Like, I love what you're doing, like reaching so many people for Christ. Like, is there any way I can help? And we ended up walking through the book of John together. And that was amazing. Yeah, I mean, in the book of John, we ended up kind of discovering that in almost every chapter, if not every chapter of John, there's something that points to the deity of Christ. And so, so it was this amazing journey where we got to kind of walk together on learning more and more what the Bible says about Jesus really being God. And yeah, and it was kind of cool to get to do that while he's also trying to show these Muslims that Jesus really is God. And so, yeah, so we got to read the whole book of John together. And yeah, I remember saying goodbye to him in our last meeting, and I felt so sad. Like, we had built such a great relationship together. I mean, yeah, definitely, like, yeah, spiritually from like going through, yeah, the book of John together, but also just as friends. I mean, like we built this really awesome friendship together, and yeah, I miss Peter a lot. So yeah, that stands out to me a lot.
Yeah, and one of the things that has been on my heart with discipleship is everybody needs to have a Paul, a Barnabas, and a Timothy, right? This idea of someone that's older that's pouring into you, someone that's in your level, like Peter, right? Who you're both on this journey together, and you get to partner together, and there's such a bond and encouragement there. And then somebody that you're pouring into, like students that you're with, or others that you're discipling on the side as well. And for you, Shelby, Monica was kind of the Paul, right? Pouring into you. What was that? What was that? A little bit of that like on that journey of Monica pouring into you in that way? What did that look like for someone?
Yeah, I love Monica. She's the best. So she's like older, like 50 something, I don't know.
That's so old.
So old.
Older.
And she's the same personality as my mom. So it's really we clicked like instantly.
Mm.
They like vibed the same. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
it's like my mom kind of. Yeah, so we would just meet and I really loved her because she was like very like, oh, you committed to doing this, so like we're doing it. So she would come up to me like, you didn't really text me back. Like, let's get
Yeah.
going. I'm like, okay. So at
Yeah.
first I was like, whoa, but then I really think that like that just really pushed me to like want to like, okay, I did say I want to commit. I actually want to commit. And so then we started going through the book of First John. It took us a year to go through First John. That book only has 5 chapters in it. But so we did a thorough investigation into First John.
Yeah.
And yeah, that book is just so fire. Like I feel like it just transformed how I was looking at so many things. And I think what was really cool about it is I came into Thailand as a missionary, so I'm already at the top of the food chain, I'm like all this. But then like just meeting with someone so much older and wiser and like she's meeting me in this place and like all my people I talked to were like over FaceTime, but she's like right there with me and doing life with me. We'd go to the beach together and just like talk about the Lord, just like so many of those like tangible things. So that really changed like, yeah, I just realized how like I got humbled real quick. Like, wow, I definitely don't know all the things I thought I knew, and it just really helped transform that. And in First John, they talk a lot about like loving your brothers. And so I think like when I looked at my organization I was with, there's a lot of Thai staff. I couldn't really speak to them very much. So that was kind of challenging. But like, okay, how do I love them despite that? Like we're called to love them. And I can't just like have a pass to not try since I
Right.
can't speak. So I think that was like really, really cool and just really helped like build my ministry there. And like when we worked at the church, just like having people coming over all the time and like, how can I just like love you, like you with nothing in return, So I think that was really, really cool to like really shape how we were doing ministry. And I think as we go forward, I'm definitely going to carry a lot of those things I learned with her into our next spot, like here and wherever we go next, just like how do we genuinely love? And then there's a lot of like doctrinal stuff I learned from there
Yeah.
and theology stuff and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really, really amazing. And I would recommend everyone have a discipler. Like,
Amen.
yeah, it was just really, and then I got to pour into younger people, which is really cool. And like kind of be like, oh, well, what do you think about this little niche thing I learned about,
Yeah.
And kind of try to like trickle
As
it
you're
down.
poured into, it overflows into others. Yeah, that's awesome.
Totally. So I got her connected with some other ladies in our church. So I'm hoping that there can be some of that loving on because she's just really awesome.
Yeah, that's
Oh, I
awesome.
miss her too.
So for you guys are in the States for a little while. But what's next? Like I know you don't know exactly what's next, but what do you think is on the horizon? Do you want to go back on the mission field again? Like what are some of your not specifics, but thoughts about that?
Yeah. That's definitely we're definitely feeling still called to overseas missions. We're kind of seeing this time of us back in America as kind of a transition period, although we're totally open if God ends up calling us back here longer term. But yeah, Shelby and I both feel really called by the Lord towards reaching the lost and specifically like reaching kind of unreached people groups, like people groups where there's not very many Christians around. And
Isn't
so
unreached like if there's less than 5% who call themselves Christian or what is
So
unreached?
unengaged is less than 3% Christian. So and that's one of the things that our church has been praying for, specifically Japan, right? As far as an unengaged people group, where an unreached means that there is no known Christians or no known churches in that. So like for us, the body people and the job people and the sonar people are groups we've been praying for, and we're starting to pray for a group in Benin. I met a missionary from Benin named Mark not too long ago, and in his country alone, I think there's 50 unreached people groups that we can partner with and get into those places. And so, so unreached and then unengaged is like Japan. There's there's like 1.2 million people in a suburb, and they don't have a church. And so, planting a church there is vital, and working on reaching people for Christ in that setting is, we have to have people have that heart for it.
And our heart is just like gospel, telling everyone possible. So I feel like that's just something that's really big on both of our hearts. And Kyle's really, really good at evangelizing, as we've talked about. And I feel like I'm practicing getting there and stuff. But yeah, our heart is really for just people to know the Lord and find freedom in Him and be able to have salvation and be able to be in heaven one day with Him. So we're just, wherever the Lord takes us next, we have some ideas. But wherever the Lord takes us next, we are just really excited to be spreading His gospel wherever that is. So we'll see. If you want to know where we're going next, comment below and guess.
Yeah, if you have ideas, comment below. We're excited as just a church to walk with you through that calling and where God calls you to be next. And we want to be a part of what you guys are doing around the world, because I think it's amazing to hear stories about what God is doing in dark places, right? In places that if they don't hear the gospel from you, they're not going to hear it from anybody. And that's something God's put upon your heart. And, Eric Ream, our beloved Now Dancing with Jesus mission pastor, would always say, pray, send, go. Like, everybody can pray for foreign missions. Everybody can send, but not everybody can go, right? It's not realistic for everybody to go, but God's called you to go. And so it's great for us to be able to live through that, supporting both through prayer and other means to support you guys on whatever God's calling is for your life. And so we're excited to be a part of that. And so thank you guys for what you've done. Spending time on the mission field, living with no AC, with rats and crazy big lizards and snakes
and huge lizards in my house.
In your house, right?
The most cockroaches ever.
Sweating more than you ever sweated in your life, and places, and but doing that for the Lord and having joy in the midst of it. So thank you guys so much. I just want to pray a blessing over you. Pray for the Lord to make it really apparent where He wants you to go next. I know you guys have an idea, but we want to follow the Lord wherever that might be, and we'll just keep investigating till God says hearty amen and says yes. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for Kyle and Shelby, Lord, and the incredible work that they did in Phuket, and just the way, Lord, that you blessed their ministry there. Thank you for Kyle and just his heart for evangelism, and for Peter and others, Lord, that he had a chance to disciple that are there. Lord, thank you for the seeds that were planted. I pray that, Lord, you'll help them to grow. Lord, I thank you for Shelby. I thank you for her heart to serve, and to serve the broken and exploited, to help them have a new trade, to serve the children, Lord, at the church, and Lord, to support and love Kyle. And so I pray a blessing over their marriage and over them, Lord, as they search, where do you want them to go next? And Lord, I pray for this time that they're home, that they get to be in a healthy church family, Lord, that you'll just bless their time and help them, Lord, as they adjust back to America and all the things that come with being in America. Lord, I pray that you'll bless them, help their marriage to be strong, Lord, and continue to bless them as you have in so many ways. Lord, I thank you for our church family, Lord, who sent them and who helped provide for them, Lord, around the world. And what a blessing it is to be a part of that work, Lord, to pray and to send and even to go, Lord. And so I pray that you'll continue to lead us, Lord, in where you want us to serve around the world. So thank you for Kyle and Shelby, and we pray a blessing over them in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Love you guys.
Love you
too. Thank you so much.